India's reliance on Russian military equipment dates back to the Cold War era. And this defense collaboration grew stronger after the Sino-Soviet split, resulting in substantial security cooperation that served as a counter to Pakistan's 1970s ties with both the US and China. Considering India's issues with China and Pakistan, and the fact that the Russia-Ukraine conflict doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon, Indian defense planners are especially worried about the future of two important defense systems, the high-tech S-400 anti-aircraft defense system and the T-72 tanks that make up most of the country's armored power. India has invested heavily in Russian weaponry over the last 6 decades. A 2020 report by the US think group Stimson Center stated that about 70 to 85% of India's military equipment is Russian-made. The Indian Army receives over 90% of its equipment from Russia, while the Indian Navy receives approximately 40% of its equipment from Russia. And around 70% of the equipment used by the Indian Air Force are from Russia, which makes Russia the biggest exporter of military hardware to India. Deals with Russia have often included smaller and larger scale projects based on domestic development and production. Smaller scale, for example, India and Russia recently agreed to spend $677 million to make over 600,000 AK-203 assault rifles together. This is the most common gun used by Indian soldiers in Kashmir. They also include big deals for things like fighter planes, submarines, and India's biggest aircraft carrier, the renamed Admiral Gorshkov, which is now called INS Vikramaditya. When it comes to anti-tank and air defense systems in the Army, the Concours Anti-Tank Guided Missile, ATGM, Kornet ATGM, OSA Surface-to-Air Missile, SAM, Pekora SAM, Strela SAM, and Igla SAM make up a substantial share. Furthermore, the Indian Army's multiple rocket launcher systems, Smerk and Grad, are Russian. Regarding submarines, the 8-kilo class submarines acquired from Russia form the bulk of India's fleet. And India also remains intent on the lease of a third Russian nuclear-powered attack submarine, Chakra III. However, Russian supply lines have been hampered. India hoped to acquire S-400s by the end of 2023, have been delayed. Moscow has also delayed delivery of Talwar Class stealth frigates. Retired Lieutenant General Prakash Menon, director of Takshashila Institution's Strategic Studies program, said that the delivery of S-400s is already being delayed, and there is little doubt that Russian supply chains are being damaged as the war continues. He said, in reality, Indian government's focus to promote the indigenization of key imported products, to decrease dependencies on imports, is largely motivated by this battle. In fact, the 9-month-long Ukraine war has served as a wake-up call for India, which has invested heavily in Russian military hardware over the last 6 decades. Penetrating the weaknesses of Russia's anti-aircraft defense. There are many mysteries surrounding Ukraine's war, but one such mystery is the S-400 systems. The world knows that the Russian army has the strongest anti-aircraft weaponry, and its most well-known systems are the S-300 and S-400, which are multi-layered surface-to-air missile batteries capable of detecting and destroying aircraft and ballistic or cruise missiles at a range of more than 300 kilometers and at extremely high altitudes. And because of this glowing reputation, Moscow boasts that the S-400 can track several dozen targets at once. These systems are among the flagships of the Russian arms industry. However, according to the French newspaper Le Monde, the S-400's capabilities is overestimated. It said since Moscow's soldiers launched an offensive on February 24, the Russian anti-aircraft defense, which Western military members regard as one of the most compact and efficient in the world, has displayed an alarming amount of concern. Ukrainian aircraft and missiles have often breached the alleged Russian anti-access bubbles over their soldiers or military locations. The newspaper said that the Ukraine war has demonstrated that the S-400s may not be as flawless as previously supposed. It said, despite this impressive arsenal, Ukrainians regularly manage to break through Russian restricted zones, which the military calls A2 or AD, that is, anti-access or area denial. And the most notable strike was occurred on August 9th, and targeted the Russian airbase in Crimea, Sarki. The airfield, located more than 200 kilometers from the front and housing the Russian Navy's 43rd Naval Aviation Regiment, was the site of many explosions that destroyed more than a dozen Sukhoi 24 bombers and Sukhoi 30 fighters. For a time, sabotage by Ukrainian partisans, or infiltrated special forces, was suspected. However, on September 7, Ukrainian Army Commander-in-Chief Valery Zaluzny acknowledged that it was a missile strike. In other words, the Russian anti-aircraft systems guarding the base were unable to intercept them. Top Indian security planners said they are keeping a close eye on the situation. In an interview, the former head of the Indian Air Force, RKS Bhadauria, said, "We have also heard about this attack, but there is no proof." India, on the other hand, has its own plans for protecting S-400 systems. Even though our enemies have better weapons to use against us than Ukraine, Indian defenses are also in a better position, he said. Another source of concern is the T-72 Ajia and T-90 tank, which is presently manufactured in India, under license from Russia, without any transfer of technology. Under the Combat Improved Ajia program, around 1,500 T-72 Ajias are being modified, with new engines and fire control systems, reactive armor, fire detection and suppression systems, and improved communication and navigation systems. Although the initial phase of the program began in the 1980s, it is unclear how many MBTs have been updated to date, but according to one official, around 70% of Indian T-72s may not be ready for combat. The program has been delayed due to budget difficulties, and now the Ukraine crisis. However, the worrying issue is that according to Western and Ukrainian estimates, more than 2,200 Russian tanks have been destroyed so far in the war, and the number could be significantly higher. Even if Ukrainian information can be ignored, but there is enough evidence to suggest that Russian tanks, especially T-72s, have been easy targets for US-supplied, Javelin anti-tank missiles, and UK-made, next-generation light anti-tank weapon missiles. Nick Reynolds, a research analyst in land warfare at the Royal United Services Institute in England, told BBC that Javelin and NLAW are very powerful. He also said that, without this deadly help, the situation in Ukraine would be very different. Even as the Department of Military Affairs collects data from all three services to better understand India's reliance on Russian supply, India is still waiting for the S-400s and other outsourced military equipment. And given the threat that China poses, India will not be able to rest until these weapon systems are delivered.